Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're going to be talking about the spell Storm of Vengeance. This is a spell I want to like, but I think I know where this video is going. Any opening words?
It's a 9th level spell, and it has a really sweet name, and it feels like this should be like the top end fantasy of the Storm Sorcerer, the top end fantasy of, the nature druid that, destroy civilization, bring back nature kind of deal, right? The reclaimer kind of fantasy archetype. And then it's just kind of like a light breeze and some loud noise. That's most of it.
I like that there's a slow build to it. Like, the clouds start rolling in. There's a chilly breeze, and you feel a few drops of rain. You look up the sky, see lightning crackling, and it's a cool effect. But all right, well, we'll get into that. Sure. So what does it do?
All right, basically, whenever you cast the spell, it does within 360 feet of you, each creature under this gigantic cloud you create, that is the Storm of Vengeance, makes a saving throw. And on a failed save, they are deafened for 5 minutes and take 2d6 thunder damage. Then, every round after that, and this is a 9th level spell, by the way, so you're spending a spell slot out the gate. Not great. 2d6 thunder damage and deafened. Round 2, everything within the cloud takes a d6 acid damage. The whole round 2 effect is period. Round 3, this one's cool. You call 6 bolts of lightning from the cloud to strike 6 creatures or objects in the area. They make dex save or take 10d6 lightning damage. Round 4, everything takes 2d6 bludgeoning damage from hail. And then rounds 5 to 10, the area is difficult terrain. It's heavily obscured. Everything takes a d6 cold damage. Ranged weapon attacks are disabled. And it imposes disadvantage on concentration checks functionally. And it automatically disperses fog, mist, and other phenomena in the area, regardless if it's magical or mundane. And that's the whole of Storm of Vengeance. That happens around 5 to 10. That's just what happens. You get the torrential storm effect of it.
All right, now it has a radius of 360 feet. Is this the largest spell in the game?
I don't want to say yes, because I think like things like hallucinatory terrain, there are spells that affect like miles distance wise when tracking and stuff, right? Like you can see them over large distance in this. But whenever you're talking about like an evocation kind of effect, like a combative giant area effect, I would hazard a guess to say this is the largest. I don't know if it needs to be this large 99% of the time for you to care about it, but yeah, sure. It's really, really big.
All right. What else? All right, so cool area. All right, let's start at the beginning. First round, you got what was it? 1d6 thunder damage and deafen.
A con save, taking 2d6 thunder damage, becoming deafened on a failed save. Notably, nothing on a pass. So there's a real chance at a lot of tables you'll cast your Storm of Vengeance and immediately nothing happens.
It depends on how many people you're casting it on.
Sure. Still don't love that. And even if you do get 150 people in this and half of them fail it, 2d6 thunder damage isn't killing like CR 1/4 creatures. It's not killing CR 1/8 creatures. So it's not really like a particularly heavy burden. This is something that like out the gate, I would want to see a real much cooler effect for the opening introduction to the one-time castable 9th level spell that requires your concentration.
Yeah, right? We've already discussed deafen doesn't really do much of anything.
Yeah, we even like when we were talking about blindness deafness, we talked about as long about it being something that's a buff as much as it was something you would debuff an enemy with, right? Yeah. Like as something that you are happy to have on yourself because it mitigates a bunch of sound-based effects. And this does that. It's kind of a net neutral. It's probably more beneficial to you than the enemies, but like it isn't always. Your bard might have a lot worse of a time if some of their spells or effects require the enemies hear them. If they're deafened, well, you just prevented the bard from doing anything cool. So that kind of sucks. That's just like the intro round. So like hypothetically, this should get cooler and cooler, right?
All right. Round 2 is 1d6 acid damage.
Period.
With no saves, apparently, right? Or
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, still 1d6 acid damage.
A third of a magic missile-ish. Okay.
Yeah.
Everything in the area.
Well, See, I'm gonna make my arguments later, but the area I think is a big thing.
Sure. I think we'll both agree that this is not something you want to be doing in combat against the big bads. That this is more of a terrorism effect.
I was gonna go against invading armies, anti-terrorists, if you will.
Sure.
But anyways, let's move on to round 3. Now you can start casting lightning bolts.
Yeah.
Those do.
It's like an upgraded call lightning at this stage. You get 6 bolts for 10d6 damage each.
Yeah.
So we're like, a fourth of a meteor rain ish, which is less than a fourth of a meteor rain, because meteor rain is hitting 3 areas for 40d6 damage. And this is hitting 6 creatures for 10d6 damage. Not the greatest thing in the world, but that's definitely the best thing we've seen out of this spell so far.
And also on a successful save, they still take half damage. So it's not a,
so your minimum
it's not
5d6.
a nothing.
Sure, which is always a big upside.
Yeah.
Round 4, we're looking at hailstones, which is just free 2d6 damage. And if I'm going to stop us here because I want to go through and say, okay, you've had this up for 4 rounds. How much damage have we done? To a single creature at its best for a 9th level spell slot and 4 rounds of maintaining concentration on your 9th level spell, you can do a maximum of 15d6 damage.
Okay.
That's not great. That's quite bad.
Not against one person, but against 1,000 people, pretty good.
Conceivably, sure. I don't know how many games are going to go against 1,000 people, but sure. Finally, rounds 5 through 10, I think, is actually where the spell is at its coolest. Honestly, I think the bulk of 5 through 10 should be happening every round. I think like the whole area negating ranged weapon attacks, the whole area taking perpetual cold damage, the whole area disrupting our concentration, which notably it's symmetrical, so it does affect your own if you're within the Storm of Vengeance. You probably shouldn't be within your own Storm of Vengeance if that's an option, or you just be like a mole 10 feet underground. That's normally how Storm of Vengeance tends to go. But like, it's a cool, this is what I would expect the baseline of Storm of Vengeance to be, and not sort of the finale portion of it, right? I would expect when you cast a 9th level spell slot to create a Storm of Vengeance, that it would be a storm that then does more things. And instead, this is ramping up to a storm and doesn't do anything past that. And I find that to be kind of frustrating. I think that's kind of dumb.
Let's go over 5 to 10. We got gusts and freezing rain. Yes. The area becomes difficult terrain and is heavily obscured.
Yep. Which basically means all attack rolls everyone has are at disadvantage. And advantage for the most part, right? Like you can't see the things that you're attacking because they go through every obscurity. So melee attacks are disadvantaged and you can't make range attacks at all. Yeah, range weapon attacks are impossible. Everything is d6 cold damage.
I don't like that. I mean, I feel like what's the point of obscuring this area or like the difficult terrain? If what's the point of keeping all these people in your Storm of Vengeance if you can't like fire volleys of arrows at them?
Volleys of arrows get shut down, but your wizards are still casting fireballs. You're still getting the giant AoE damage effects that you want. Again, you're firing into nothingness because you can't see into your own Storm of Vengeance, so you don't necessarily know where they are. But we're at a tier of play where like you don't really hate just throwing giant area of effect spell damaging into this, right? You don't hate having your cleric cast like a sunburst or whatever into a big enough area in the center just to do a bunch of damage to whatever is in it. It becomes kind of like a giant sleet storm in that way. It takes your 9th level spell slot and doesn't have the upside of sleet storm being instantaneous, where you have to ramp up 5 rounds to have the sleet storm effect, which makes it not useful as a sleet storm effect because that means you've been doing things for 5 whole rounds and expecting to maintain concentration on this for 5 whole rounds, which is a pipe dream at this stage of the game. Like that, I want to make it very clear that the reason that I have my opinions about the spell is that the idea that you're going to maintain concentration on Storm of Vengeance at 9th level or in that tier of play for more than 4 rounds is laughable. Like there will be, unless you're using this in an out of combat scenario to do huge amounts of harm, like you said, to like giant armies or something, where you've found yourself a situation where you can cast this from a mile away and are just raining terror upon whoever is within the area. Like you just sit atop a mountain and destroy the incoming army, right? This spell's never going to work. It's never going to be usable.
All right, before you keep going on about that, now I'm looking at rounds 5 to 10. Am I right in that the only damage that this does is D6 cold damage?
That is correct.
All right, now that sucks.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel very vengeful. It feels like a brisk chill. It feels like you forgot to wear your booties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time defending this one. However, yeah, I don't think this is going to be an everyday usable spell. But when you are defending the wall against the hordes that are coming at you, I think it's pretty cool, at least. Soften them up quite a bit.
It'll hold like a 720-foot area sphere, which is enormous. That's like undisputably very large for a minute. Sometimes that just like kills 720 feet worth of creatures. If they're like, we're talking like foot grunts, we're talking about goblin infantry, we're talking about hobgoblin generals, that kind of stuff, right? Like Mechanus invading a bunch of mod runs and duod runs and tride runs flying through. Storm of Vengeance hypothetically just kills them all over the course of a minute in a gigantic area. Now, it is only a minute. And if we're in the scope of play that 9th level spells are being cast, you have to ask yourself, well, how much better, how usable is that use case whenever there's also 36 spells that do better things in that use case that are 9th level and other things that are way more powerful and applicable across the board. Like True Polymorph gives you access to monsters that can probably handle that same area without any relative issue. Shape Change does a similar thing where it's like, oh yeah, it is the best part of True Polymorph and you can just change at will to whatever you like. You're going to have the abilities to handle this kind of area and effect. You're going to be able to turn into a giant dragon and do 120-foot cones every single turn or next to every single turn and just decimate armies, right? Where decimating armies is something 9th level spells are supposed to do. Most 9th level spells do more than decimate armies. So if this is all that this kind of does and that army has to be kind of weenie for it to be good anyway, like if we're looking at creatures that have, I don't know, 10d10 HP, we're looking at an army of giants, this spell's a joke. It doesn't do half their health. It'll kill 6 of them maybe with the lightning bolts.
Yeah, I was thinking, the generals, but I don't know. But yeah, but an entire army of giants, not great.
Oh, and even if you hit the generals with a 10d6 bolt, this still isn't killing them, right? This is still collective damage. If we add all of it up, right? 5d6 from the final rounds. If you get the full 10 rounds, 10d6 from the bolts, and then we are looking at 5d6 the rest of it. So this is half of meteor rain damage. If you get all of it, that it does half to everything that isn't 6 creatures. So 6 creatures take half of meteor rain damage. Everything else takes, and this is assuming you get a full minute of concentration off, a quarter of meteor rain damage, which at that point is just a big fireball. And at that point, for the sheer quantity of downsides that this has going on, I don't see it.
Yeah, all right. I'm not. All right. My only arguments are that in a very, very niche set of circumstances, this could have some effect, and it's cool.
Sure. I actually think its coolness is a detriment to it. I think its coolness is going to make people take it and try and use it in combat because it's their big capstone druid feature, and then they're going to get 2 rounds in and be like, I should have just cast an upcast like summon spell, or I should have just cast an upcast evocation spell that does damage, right? I should have just cast Sunburst or Sunbeam or whatever. I should have dealt it because it would do way more damage front loaded, and then I wouldn't have lost concentrated immediately and had dealt burning hands in a 360-foot area, right? Because that, like, if you drop concentration before round 3, your capped damage is 3d6. Some creatures are taking 1d6 for a 9th level spell slot with next to no other conditions. It deafens them. It does 3d6 damage and then does 10d6 damage. No other conditions, no other interesting elements of the storm. There aren't, like, this could have easily layered, like, round 2 is where the heavy obscurity comes in. Round 2 is where the strong gusts of wind come in to negate range attacks. Make it a little bit more high utility and get denser and denser as it goes on. But instead, it just crams all the interesting features in the 5 to 10 range. And by the time you get there, you probably didn't, because you probably lost concentration on this by then. And you're just really sad you spent a 9th level spell slot in this garbage.
Do we have to guess what your score is?
It's more generous than you think. I think this is a 2, but it is, again, there, like you said, there are some few niche circumstances where this will do a powerful effect. Killing a small army within 720-foot diameter sphere, that's a big area. This is the kind of thing where you can see from a mountaintop and cast down on a town that you really, really hate. This is something that a villain can do the same thing for. I think both those applications would be way more interesting if the spell had a duration of like an hour and did just a perpetual D6 acid rain damage, heavy durance, like a much more natural apocalypse kind of feel to it is what I would rather see. I'd rather see it be a long duration, high world impact spell that you give to villains or you give to players that are trying to like draw enemies out of a space. Use it as a siege tool more. Let it really develop as an interesting long duration storm, as opposed to a minute cast time where you really only get, okay, everyone has to take cover for a minute and then it's over, and it's still not even really that great of that effect.
Yeah, I think it is a good DM tool. Hit the town where your player characters are staying, and it's not. It sucks enough that it's not going to kill them, but yeah, it's a good way to start a story or whatever.
Sure, and I guess you just have to have the villain do that every day for like half a year for it to matter, because that's the impact the effect literally has. Like, it only lasts a minute. Unlike Earthquake, this doesn't even destroy things for the most part, right? The only things that I would conceivably argue as a DM do destroy things are just the hail. The hail destroys like glass and shit, and the lightning bolts can strike a couple of buildings. I don't think that's enough to raise a town, where like Earthquake for a low level slot, it's definitely giving you that effect way better. And I mean, like, I don't even think Earthquake's that good of a spell, but at least it's like incorporating some amount of natural destruction to it, which I would expect to see in this kind of effect, right?
All right. Well, shit, I was gonna give it a 1, but
it's close.
Yeah.
But I think there's just enough use case out of it where you'll be like, all right, this is gonna look cool for a minute. This will be a great villainous motive. This will be a great reason the heroes get out of bed to go fight the villain. This will be a random weird tool where you go to the Cobalt Warren or you go to the above ground fortress. And you'll be like, I'm just gonna stick in a Storm of Vengeance, kill all the outside guards. And that's not worth a 9th level spell slot, but usable.
No. The villain thing convinced me. I'll bump it up to 2 as well. Got anything else about it?
It's a really cool design that is utter garbage.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a spell that does cool things each subsequent round. I love the idea of a storm building over time. 1d6 damage ain't it. No. 2d6 damage ain't it. Like, I don't know how they dropped the ball that hard on such a cool idea.
Well, we already covered weird, so that's
I guess we do know how.
All right, everyone. That was Storm of Vengeance. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.